everybody. I'm Caryn Hartglass. You're listening to It's All About Food. It's a couple of days after Valentine's Day, and who else would I want to have this week's program with? None other than my Valentine, Gary de Mattei. Gary.
Caryn Hartglass.
Gary de Mattei.
Caryn Hartglass.
Hey, and today is Mardi Gras.
Fat Tuesday.
Mardi Gras. Fat Tuesday.
Woo! And what are you doing on Fat Tuesday so you don't spread COVID? Are you having a Mardi Gras party at Responsible Eating and Living Pandemic Headquarters? I mean, are they even having Mardi Gras this year?
I've got my colorful beads on.
You do. You look grand. Very good. I have my gong and my cheesy bell. It's my dinner bell.
Right.
Because this is all about food. So we're going to talk about things that relate to food. Beignets. There's vegan beignet recipes out there. Beignet is a donut.
Les beignets.
Covered with brown sugar.
And they're fried.
Yes. Well, you would probably make a baked beignet.
We have a baked donut recipe at Responsible Eating and Living.
Yes, we do. I knew it.
Yes.
And also some of the foods that are now going vegan, and they're on all of the vegan sites that are associated with Mardi Gras are Jambalaya. And again, we have all of this arborio rice, so I would probably try a Jambalaya with arborio rice, and it probably wouldn't taste Cajun, it would taste Italian, because all of my cooking, for some reason, comes out tasting Italian.
Okay, tonight we're going to make a Jambalaya
and
Mardi Gras style.
And not a crawfish paella. Because we're vegan, and we don't want to bother any of those little crowfish or crawfish. Another really popular food at this time is a étouffée.
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 Ouais.
Right?
C'est quoi ça?
And they all have this...
What is an étouffée, Gary?
An étouffée, well, it's just another dish with rice and normally sausage. But this recipe that I found on one of the vegan sites has... Excuse me. Sorry, wait, one more time. Has
okay, mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Thank you. Oh, it's tough for me to say. Mushrooms in the étouffée. And it, again, I would make it, and I would not make it with mushrooms, but I would make it with because it's traditionally made with sausage. I would make it with one of the many vegan sausages that are out there now. I mean, there's
Field roast.
You've had them on the show.
And Nava Atlas had a cookbook.
Book.
She has a recipe for
Nava plant-powered protein, right?
Right.
She has a new book out. You interviewed her.
And you know, Gary, if I put you to it, you could come up with your own.
Vegan sausage.
It would probably taste Italian.
It would definitely taste Italian, but there's a lot of andouille, again, French, because in Louisiana, it's very French-inspired.
Yes.
They were settled.
Creole.
There's an andouille sausage that you can get.
Is it spicy?
Yeah, oh
yeah. Really spicy.
That's the idea. It's got to be spicy.
Spicy.
A vegan sausage and mushroom étouffée with rice, of course. Another one, obviously, I mentioned the beignet. Gumbo. Now, that's a big one.
We've never made gumbo.
And again, it's served with rice. They do a lot of rice dishes.
Well, we have a bunch of things we have to make.
Well, it's hearty. The food is very hearty. And it soaks up all the alcohol. That's what the purpose of the rice is. It's to soak up the alcohol. And then they have these po' boys, they call them. They're sandwiches. Obviously, it's a take on poor boy. And again, some folks are doing oyster mushroom po' boys and different things like that, because you would normally make sausage poor boy or a po' boy. And they have donuts, a lot of donuts, obviously cinnamon apple king's cakes, and
I'm over the donuts.
Cajun tofu is a big one for vegans who are wanting to celebrate the Mardi Gras in Cajun style. They do a vegan Cajun tofu with grits, and again, that's polenta in my world, so it would taste Italian if I was going to make it. But the big side dish with Cajun tofu and grits are greens. Oh, and we love making a big pot of greens. Yeah, the other thing that just happened was, obviously, Valentine's Day, so I wrote a little poem for you.
Oh, let's hear it, Gary.
Okay. It's just, I wrote it before we went on the air. I call it Tuesday Morning After Valentine's Day. The roses are dead. My violets are through. Dark chocolate's all gone. Champagne is drunk too. Sink's full of dishes. The bed is a mess. I really don't care to get up and dress.
That's hysterical, Gary.
Yeah.
Who are you thinking of? Certainly not us.
Well, that's the point. It's a poem, so it kind of goes out to the listener. Maybe some can relate, maybe some cannot. I know you cannot relate to this poem.
I cannot relate to
because we didn't have any champagne, and we didn't have any violets or roses, and we don't ever have a sink full of dishes unless you're the one in charge. And, and our bed is never a mess because we make it as soon as we get up in the morning. And one of the things that we did on Valentine's Day was enjoy a fabulous dinner made by you.
Made by me.
You were in the kitchen for a big part of Valentine's Day. Let us know what you did.
Okay, well, first I want to say that it didn't feel like I was in the kitchen because
you were
I was having a good time. I started by making yogurt because it was time to make yogurt. How do I know it's time to make yogurt? When we have a quarter cup left of homemade yogurt.
Homemade cashew yogurt.
Homemade cashew yogurt. It's time to make new yogurt because I always make my new batch of yogurt with a quarter cup of the prior batch.
Right. It's kind of like a sourdough starter.
Yeah.
You keep a little bit of each batch.
Right.
And the longer you keep it, the greater it is. The more bugs.
Exactly. So it was time, and I had already soaked the cashews. They had been soaking for a couple of days.
Ooh, that makes it better.
You know, some people say, can you do that? And I say, yes, I can, because I do it. Is it okay to do that? I think it is because I've been doing it a long time. Sometimes we put nuts in a jar to soak, and we don't use them for a few days.
Right.
It's better to change the water, I think.
The key is, though, you soak your nuts.
But the key is you soak your nuts. Yeah. Anyway.
Hey, now, that's a little bit... All right, sorry about that.
Gary has his own sound effects today.
I have my own censoring sound effects. You soak your nuts. Okay, so you got up.
So I made the cashew yogurt. And the thing is, I can do this now without thinking about it because I've done it so many times. But I wanted to get up and do it right away because I put it in our oven that has a dehydrator option and it takes 8 hours. So the oven would not be usable for 8 hours.
Right.
Okay, so I did that and I got that ready. And then I prepared the flourless chocolate cake that I was talking about making, which I made, everyone. First, I made the crust because this has a almond, coconut, carrot crust, which I sweetened with dates instead of sugar. Yes, I was making this whole food plant-based this time, so I was eliminating the sugar from this recipe just to see how it would come out. And then I pressed that into a pan, and then I prepared the dry and wet ingredients. I didn't want to put them all together until 8 hours later when the yogurt was done because there was baking powder in the dry ingredients, and I didn't want to activate that baking powder with the moisture until I was ready. So I just kept them all prepared and separate. The next thing I did, I prepared onions and broth, because I wanted to make French onion soup. Now, a few days ago, I made our almond mozzarella cheese recipe because I knew I was going to be making French onion soup for Valentine's Day.
Yes.
So I made a quick homemade broth, which consisted of carrots, celery, onions, and some onion skins. And the onion skins give a nice rich color to broth.
Now, when you mention onion skins, are you talking about the skin you normally peel away from the oven?
Yeah.
Onion? You actually use that in the broth?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. He's keeling over now that I told him.
No. So you strained that.
Oh, I did. When it was done.
Right.
Cooking,
No, that's done. I was just saying
thing.
that's very French to use all of your peelings and all of that.
C'est très français, je sais.
And normally you would roast them if you wanted a dark stock because that's what gives it the darker color.
I couldn't roast them because the yogurt was in the oven.
Right. No, but you didn't want a dark stock.
No. No, well, it could have been dark.
It could have been dark. Okay, no, that was very good. That's very French.
Then I took 4 big onions, I chopped them, and then I saute them slowly until they caramelized. I was doing a bunch of different things, tidying up, cleaning, doing some exercises,
Right.
all while cooking the onions. I can never do one thing at the same time. I am an ultimate multitasker, even though the research now says multitasking isn't efficient. But in the kitchen, I'm like dancing. I'm doing all
Right.
kinds of things. I emptied our water distiller and refilled it and to make some more water. There are lots of different things to do in the kitchen while you're making one or two or three things. Okay, so I had the onions done and the broth done, the yogurt in the oven, and then I made breakfast. And I wanted to keep with this French theme, and I made buckwheat crepes. And I keep learning about buckwheat crepes, so you may have heard us talk about this before. We use raw buckwheat groats. The raw versus toasted discussion continues. We still had some toasted buckwheat left over that I had bought by mistake. It was organic, but toasted. I didn't know it was toasted. We used it. It made crepes. It was fine. It just seemed to need a little more water. So I wanted to finish that up. And I put them in the blender because I always grind the groats up to make a flour. And then I had a pot of hot water sitting there because we use a Breville tea maker to make our tea. And it had some hot water. And I thought, maybe I'll just add this hot water instead of room temperature water. It was right there. Maybe I don't know what it'll do. And I poured it in there, and I didn't have a batter anymore. I had porridge.
Right.
I had cereal. Now, I don't know if it was because it was toasted and getting older, or if it was just adding hot water to it.
Hot water, right.
But I learned something. Don't add hot water to your buckwheat groats when making crepes.
After you grind your buckwheat groats into flour.
Actually, I didn't. They were just groats. I added the hot water. I blended them up.
Oh, you were
and
adding
it
the hot
turned
water.
into
Yeah. And this was during the blending process. It turned into porridge.
Yeah. So I just scooped it all out,
Wow.
and I said, okay, we'll have buckwheat porridge for breakfast one day, not today. And I put that away.
Yeah, for me, that would go great with a little maple syrup.
Oh, yeah, it's good. And then we have a brand new bag of raw buckwheat groats from foodtolive.com.
Right.
And I started making the buckwheat crepes, which are so easy to make. And if you haven't made them, please make them.
But don't use hot water.
Don't use hot water and don't use toasted buckwheat. Use raw buckwheat groats. The recipe is simple. It's 1 1/3 cups of groats, 1 3/4 cups of water. You blend them together. You know, I used to just make the flour first and then add the water. You don't have to. The groats, water, blend them up, make a batter. That's it.
It was delicious. And I came in at the last minute to say, hey, do you need any help? So I made the peanut butter cream. Now, I know a lot of people are allergic to peanuts and they don't put peanut butter cream on their crepes. But we have a tradition that we make a little peanut butter cream. And this time, to keep with your goal of not using any sugar or agave or maple syrup or any of that, I used apricot butter. That's a staple here at the Responsible Eating and Living Kitchen. And I sweetened it with apricot butter or apricot butter, depending on where you're from.
Yeah, it's yummy. It's
Apricot,
yummy.
apricot.
Now I'll talk about the rest of the menu.
Yes.
So I was planning to make French onion soup, so I had to make French bread, and I prepared everything and got the dough
But
rising.
your French bread isn't like someone else's French bread because your French bread is gluten-free.
Well, it's vegan and gluten-free.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks need to know that.
Well, people listening know
process
that
is
about me.
The process is even a little more involved. It's a little more...
Okay, it's a little more involved. The recipe's at responsibleeatingandliving.com. It's called La Baguette.
Because what I'm trying to show is how you worked your ass off on Valentine's Day in the kitchen. Which you didn't consider it work.
No, it was play.
Yeah.
I consider it play. Anyway, I grind my own flour. Okay, you've heard this 100 times. This time it was...
Well, we're getting lots of new listeners, I'll have you know, because you are an award-winning podcaster. It bears repeating.
Okay. This time I used oats, millet, and garbanzo bean flour and some sunflower seeds. The sunflower seeds, I just use a little bit, but it's like adding oil. That's my fat.
That's your fat. Now, you used to buy a pre-mixed, gluten-free, all-purpose flour, but now you make your own.
Now I make my own. Am I nuts?
Well, that's amazing. No, you're not nuts.
You know, when I started,
you don't put nuts in it. You put seeds.
When I started into gluten-free baking, I was researching on the web, and I was making my own flour mix. Let's say, so I had rice flour and sorghum flour and tapioca starch and these different things, and I was looking online and mixing them together, and then I went, oh my god, this is just crazy, too much trouble, and I ended up getting the ready-made mix. But I find that what we do now, with the whole grains that we have in the house, I just use them as needed.
And it turns out great every time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't need flours in the house. That's what I'm saying. I just take the grains that we have, throw them in the Vitamix.
Flours, not Flowers.
Oh, a little spelling lesson here. I think we need to ring the bell.
You don't need those kind of flours. You need the other kinds of flour. Don't need the other kinds of flours.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
Trying to do
so
something.
I made my own broth, my own vegan cheese, my own bread, and made the French onion soup. The recipe's at responsibilityanliving.com, and
This French onion soup, folks, is amazing. If you are someone transitioning to a plant-based vegan lifestyle and you used to have the old French onion soup, this one is better.
Now, if you want to make it easier, of course, you can buy your own bread, you can buy your own vegetable broth, and you can buy your own vegan cheese and just throw it together, and I imagine it's a lot easier. But it won't be as good.
But the secret ingredient to your broth, I think, is obviously love, because you love what you do, and it really does come through in the food, is the love that you have for this kind of process. But the other secret ingredient, I think, is that dark miso that we get from...
Right. South River miso.
South River miso.
Yeah, I used a 3-year miso. Sometimes I use the barley miso. This was a rice miso.
It's a dark, rich...
It's a dark, rich flavor, which I like to use for recipes that call for a beef broth.
Right, a beefy broth.
This is my beefy miso. Wrapping it all up, we had the French onion soup. We had some salad. Thank you, Gary. You made the salad. And
I needed to do something.
We had some leftovers from the night before, an encrusted tofu steak. We make this every week, folks. We love it. And then for dessert, I took out the flourless chocolate cake.
Ah, so good.
This isn't for everybody. It's just sweet. It's not sweet enough for the classic American palate. The standard American diet palate, the sad palate.
It's actually really, really wonderful.
But I thought it was really good.
Well, anything that has, 21 dates?
Yeah, it had about 20 dates in it.
That's going to be good eating in my world.
But it was...
And it was sweet.
Yeah, I could add a few more dates in it, but it had no sugar. That's the point.
Right. It was really good. And you don't want to, eat the whole thing because that's a lot of dates.
We didn't.
No, I know. It was like you just want
slices.
A small slice. And so each slice you're probably getting a date and a half, 2 dates?
Yeah, under 2 dates.
Right. Under 2 dates. The mind reels with the possibilities of the double entendre with that last statement. I had 2 pieces, so I had 4 dates. And
under 4 dates.
Under 4 dates. And again, the mind reels with the possibilities of the double entendre. But you'll love this recipe. I hope you put it up. The only thing it was missing in my mind was some sort of a dollop of some kind of cashew cream or some sort of frozen glacé, some kind of...
ice cream.
Gelato.
Vanilla
ice cream. Yes.
Something else that I've recently made that I want to talk about is how nutty I am. Or how spicy I can be.
Just don't forget, if you are nutty, just soak your nuts.
Okay, so we don't drink a lot of caffeinated beverages in this house. I drink more than Gary does because Gary doesn't tolerate caffeine well, so he's given up caffeine. And one of the teas that we drink is a chai spice tea with rooibos.
Very decaffeinated.
Very decaffeinated. And I would buy these organic bags of Indian chai spice without the black tea, just the spice mix. And it's been out of stock for almost a year now.
And so what does Caryn Hartglass decide to do?
I decided I would buy all of the individual spices in the Indian chai spice mix that I typically would buy. It was an investment.
And those are?
So we already had cinnamon sticks, fennel, anise, star anise.
We didn't have cloves, did we?
No, I bought whole cloves. I bought cardamom pods.
Right.
And chunky pieces of dry ginger. We had ground ginger, but I wanted it in pieces.
Right.
And we have peppercorns.
Right.
I think that's all that I put in there.
And why was it an investment? These are organic.
They're
correct?
organic, and I bought a pound bag of each.
Right.
Because I like to get the best price, and I buy in bulk. And then what I had to do was figure out the ratio of everything to get a chai spice mix that
so there was a little bit of
we liked. So there was a little testing
going on.
But I'm very
delicious.
happy. It's delicious.
Yes, and you used a mortar and pestle
Yeah.
to grind it up.
Yeah, I didn't want to make a powder, but you
No.
have to make it kind of chunky.
And
so
sometimes a blender would be too powerful.
definitely, if I put it in the Vitamix, forget about it.
Forget it. So you
Forget
took
about
the
it.
old... You would look like a chemist, a druggist. You were in there grinding up this... Like, what
The
are you...
cinnamon sticks.
You getting into a new line of work, Caryn? I was interested to see what was going on here.
Well, it wouldn't be a new line because my background is in chemistry, but
I was thinking more like you were dealing drugs or something.
I missed that one.
That's okay. You're allowed to have those things go over your head. So it was cool. And you really worked hard, and the benefactor of all of your hard labor was me yet again. So thank you.
You're welcome, but you cook plenty, Gary, so I always benefit from your cooking.
Yes, that was a delicious meal. During that meal, here's the good part. Here's the dessert for me. During that meal, we had a lovely conversation about an author by the name of Alain de Botton. We listened to a podcast that he was on, WNYC. Now, this is the same man who wrote the smashing hit New York Times essay, Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person. It was the #1 read piece in the New York Times the year it came out. I think it was a couple of years
2016,
ago.
I think.
Right. He offered up some truths that he shared with all of us. We listened to this while we ate dinner.
The podcast is called The True Hard Work of Love and Relationships, and it's part of the podcast On Being.
Right. And he says love is something we have to learn and we can make progress with, and that it's not just an enthusiasm, it's a skill. And it requires forbearance, generosity, imagination, and a million things besides. The course of true love is rocky and bumpy, and the best of times, and the more generous we can be towards that flawed humanity, the better chance we'll have of doing the true hard work of love. So, love is hard, and it's difficult. He goes on to say so many wonderful things throughout this podcast. I recommend everyone who is living with someone else who gets up at 4 a.m. to make yogurt.
I didn't get up at 4 a.m.
Listen to this. Well, it felt like 4 a.m.
But you know, this program is not just for couples.
No.
It's for everyone.
Everyone.
Because
everyone's probably been in a relationship.
But not just relationships between romantic partners.
No.
This is about relationships with anyone.
Right. And
in your family, with friends, anyone.
Yeah, he says, look, love is painful, poignant, touching attempt by two flawed individuals to try and meet each other's needs in situations of gross uncertainty and ignorance about who they are and who the other person is, but we're going to do our best. That's a much more generous starting point. So the acceptance of ourselves as flawed creatures seems to me what love really is. Love is at its most necessary when we are weak, when we feel incomplete, and when we must show love to one another at those points. So we've got these two contrasting stories, and we get them muddled. And I thought that was really an interesting point about, two people coming together. You have to realize that you are definitely flawed. And he also went on to talk about, and I'm paraphrasing, how you are told that if somebody is trying to, quote, change you, that they are wrong in doing so. And he re-scripts it, and I know you and I do a lot of re-scripting, by saying it's not necessarily that the person is trying to change you, it's that the person is your teacher. And if you look at it that way, it makes it it opens some doors.
Yeah, we're all here to learn.
Right.
And we can learn a lot.
And I can attest to you being my teacher in so many ways. For example, I knew nothing about going plant-based until I started to watch you and learn about why you do it, and watched you go through your cancer journey, and watched you heal yourself. And while you were going through that cancer journey, you were also battling with insurance companies on the phone for hours on hold while you were going through chemo. It was extraordinary, the lessons that I learned by watching what you went through and what you were put through. It wasn't necessarily like I was being forced to change. I wanted my world to open up to a new adventure, and this is a great adventure.
One of the things that I liked that he talked about was the mundanity of life.
Right. I know.
And how in movies and in romance novels and in soap operas and television series, we don't really see that.
No.
We see the couple comes together and they have what appears to be drama in their getting to know each other relationship, and then they finally connect happily ever after. It's the end.
Yeah. And the end usually isn't the end at all. It's the beginning.
It's the beginning.
And so we are basically brainwashed by many of these rom-coms that we watch that, well, that's what we need. We need that kind of life, but it never shows what happens afterwards, where the taxes are needing to be paid and the kitchen is needing to be cleaned. And
the laundry needs to be done.
And heck, I learned that by watching Henry Fonda and Lucille Ball, and with 6 you get egg roll. I mean,
so some
Henry
shows
Fonda
did show
talked
it.
about that, but not everyone probably watched it.
And
but,
I think we see more of this mundanity during the pandemic.
Right. The mundanity of the
us.
COVID lifestyle 1 year later. I'm sure a lot of folks are seeing patterns in their partner's behavior or in their own behavior that they now are trying to deal with.
And a lot of this mundanity has to do with food, because in order to get a meal prepared, it's not just cooking. You have to plan it. You have to shop for the ingredients or make sure you have them. And then, of course, you have to prep them. And
especially now, a lot of folks would go to a restaurant on Valentine's Day. I remember my experience in the restaurant business. We called Valentine's Day was like one of the biggest nights in the restaurant business, and it was called amateur night, because folks who don't normally go out to dinner, they make it this night to go to dinner in a restaurant. And with COVID, a lot of folks had to stay at home alone.
Right. Stay at home and alone.
The mundanity of the COVID lifestyle 1 year later on Valentine's Day.
I've been aware of the patterns and the repetition of the daily routine for a long time. I often, when I get up in the morning, or even sometimes in the middle of the night when I go to the bathroom, which I do, I hear the Yusuf Cat Stevens song in my head. Everybody remember Yusuf Cat Stevens? There was a song, How Many Times? Did you know that song, Gary?
Yes, that's a great song.
How many times must I get up, look out, and see the same old view? How many times must I wear the same old things and hear the same old things that I do? How many times must I clean this face, and how many times must I shine my shoes? How many times must I drink the same old drink and dream the same old dreams that I do? Now, that song was about someone who lost his love, and he was, reflecting on his life. But I see this all the time, the patterns, or like Groundhog's Day, the movie, where you're repeating the same thing over and over until you get it right.
And relationships are a lot like that, aren't they?
Yes, that's the point. Relationships.
You repeat the same mistakes that you call mistakes. And I think that Alain de Botton was trying to say was that they aren't really mistakes. They need some re-scripting. My recommendation is that you check out this podcast, because it was really wonderful.
When we're aware of the mundanity, when we're aware of the things that need to be done, when we're aware of the repetitive events, we can look at it as something boring and be resentful about them, or we can always bring a freshness about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I like to do. I recognize that, yes, this is repeating over and over and over. What can I do to make it enjoyable? What can I do to make it fresh? Because this is life.
Right.
Are you going to enjoy your life, or are you going to be bored with it?
Exactly. And again, to touch on what you were saying about how the end of a romantic movie is usually, that's it, that's the end. They don't show you what happens after the couple gets together. And he says, de Botton says that we are strangely obsessed by the run-up to love. And what we call a love story is really just the beginning of a love story. But we leave that out. But most of us, we're interested in long-term relationships. We're not just interested in the moment that gets us into love. We're interested in the survival of love over time. Like you were just saying, the survival of love over time for me is knowing there will be patterns, knowing that there will be some mundanity, knowing that there will be some things that need to be factored in. It's not always going to be just about the sex or the fun. There is a lot more going on. There's the taxes. There's the doing the dishes. There's the standing by your partner while they're tying up the oven for 8 hours and understanding that this is the time that is needed to restock the cupboards.
Sometimes when things get very stressful, or sometimes you come back from an adventure, a vacation, who knows what, you welcome the comfort of the routine.
The patterns.
The patterns.
The mundanity.
Yeah. So when it comes to cooking, I know a lot of people have their go-to dishes, and that's what they make over and over again. Over and over.
Right.
And we do it here
I'm
at
doing
home.
that. I'm finding myself doing that for the last year. I've been kind of locked into this pattern, and it's based on when we get our produce and what needs to go so that we can make room for the new.
Yeah. Sometimes we look forward to those dishes every week, and then it's great to try something new.
Right. For example, when you are running out of a certain grain and you want to make a gluten-free flour mix, you will then, as you were saying earlier, try a new grain to grind to put into your gluten-free flour mix. And it's worked every single time. And the bread that you made this time, the gluten-free, I'll call it French bread, baguette, was absolutely delicious.
He says that every time.
No, it was absolutely delicious.
He says that about my waffles, the pancakes, the bread.
I don't say it about your mushrooms.
You don't say it. No, that's true.
That's right. But what I am leaning towards now is this bread, usually the indicator for me is how it slices after it comes out of the oven, because we never want to wait for it to cool off before we slice it.
It's true.
This bread that you made yesterday sliced brilliantly right out of the oven.
Yeah,
and that
true.
was an indicator. And it made great croutons. And what are some of the other things we learn about croutons when they go into French onion soup? We have to dry them out. We have to put them in the oven, and we have to make them more of a toast than a fresh bread, because we want it to float in the French onion soup so the cheese sits on top. And again, the vegan cheese, how did we melt that yesterday? We put it under the broiler. In the restaurant business, you would use something called a salamander to make your French onion soup, and we have a broiler here at home, a convection broiler. We're really lucky to have that. It also has, as you mentioned, a dehydrator. You just put it under the broiler and it melted perfectly. And this was what, the almond cheese that you made?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, some might call it a nut jello.
Right. Exactly.
Because
we know people that would call it nut jello.
We do. Because what solidifies it is the agar-agar, which is a sea gelatin.
A lot of people probably don't know about. So it's spelled AGAR. It's a seaweed gelatin. The reason we don't use traditional Knott's gelatin or other gelatins is because it's not vegan. Knott's is not vegan. Why is that? Because it's made with bones.
Yeah, cartilage.
Cartilage.
Yeah, it's
ground
gross.
cartilage.
Yeah.
For our new listeners out there who are trying to transition, Jell-O is made with ground cartilage.
Yum, not.
Yum.
Yeah.
Put a little sugar in.
And
food
you can do
coloring.
exactly the same thing with this wonderful product, agar-agar, we talked about why we have to repeat it, but you can call it agar, or you can call it agar.
Just don't call it agar.
It's a little tricky to get to know and be familiar with it. The best version of it is the ground powder. I find that the most predictable. And if you see different recipes with agar that give you volume, you want to be careful because you want to measure your agar in weight. That way you really know you're getting the right amount. Some other ingredients don't matter as much, but this does.
Some other ingredients don't matter as much, but
but it makes a great jello.
And it does, and it makes a great
nut jello.
Nut jello.
Or cheese, as we call it.
The other secret ingredient in your French onion soup was the vermouth, right?
Yes, we use Dolin. Or Dolin.
Which is vegan. And you know, with this today being Mardi Gras, which usually symbolizes the last day you can splurge, because the next 40 days and 40 nights, a lot of folks give things up because of what they call Lent. How do you know if your booze is vegan? We have a really credible source that we go to called barnivore.com, and they have a search bar, and all you need to do is type in the type of booze that you're wanting to drink, and it will tell you whether or not it's vegan. If it doesn't, it asks you to contact the manufacturer and then let them know, and that's how they keep their site current. So,
yeah, and they give you the language to ask
right.
the provider to see if their
we
products
had a really
are vegan.
Interesting reaction from a
winemaker.
A winemaker in the Napa Valley, or maybe it was Sonoma. When we asked them about their wine, if it was vegan, they took offense.
As I called them, I left a message. They called, I think they left a message, or maybe I spoke to them right away and I asked them, is their wine vegan? And she said it isn't. We use egg whites to do the settling of the solids. And she said, I wouldn't use bentonite clay, which is what is used in the vegan wines. And she said, bentonite clay is cat litter. I wouldn't use bentonite clay. And I said, okay, thank you very much. We hung up. And then she called me back.
That's why getting the verbiage from Barnivore was so helpful, because it wasn't offensive.
It's not offensive.
It was phrased in a way that it wasn't going to...
But she had to call me back because she wanted me to know that she wouldn't use bentonite clay. She was proud to use egg whites, and she didn't seem to be sensitive enough. She was defensive, not sensitive.
Yeah, she was very defensive.
Yeah.
So be careful when you do contact these folks, because a lot of them are going to be defensive about why their wine isn't vegan, because they're getting asked a lot of questions. Is your wine vegan?
And I want to say, growing grapes and making wine is not an easy thing to do. I'm sure her business was very challenging, and
I'm sure a lot of people are asking, is your wine vegan? And it's more difficult to go vegan for a lot of wineries.
And hearing from whiny vegans
right.
about their wine,
well, a lot of folks
can make you defensive.
Don't want their wine to have egg whites in it. So a lot of folks who aren't even vegan, a lot of folks are, and of course they say, well, you don't taste them. It's just a filtering system. I don't know. I'm not a winemaker. But I know that Guinness, this time of year, because what's right around the corner, St. Patrick's Day, Guinness went vegan recently. They were getting a lot of pressure.
It took a long time.
It took a lot of pressure. So, but it's only certain Guinnesses. I think it's just their draft. Anyway, you check out Barnivore if you're wondering whether or not your booze is vegan. Because a lot of it is, but a lot of it isn't, especially wine and beer. There are some wine and beer that aren't vegan. What is isinglass? Isinglass is the bladder of a fish, most commonly sturgeon or cod, that is used in the process of brewing beer in order for the finished product to have a clearer, less murky appearance. It does so by sticking to all the unwanted particles and excess yeast floating in the beer before finally thickening into a jelly-like substance that falls to the bottom of the cask, making it easy to remove. Because isinglass is taken out of the beer before it goes on sale, it technically isn't in the beverage, but undoubtedly traces can be found in any beer still filtered this way. Beer has been filtered like this for many centuries, but thankfully new scientific and technological discoveries have allowed for companies to find alternatives to animal products.
Hooray!
Yeah, so isinglasses, if you hear about beer being filtered with isinglass, that's another word for fish bladder.
Yummy.
Yum.
I always wonder how they figured these things out
How did they?
in the day.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, we're a very creative species. Crazy and creative.
And as Caryn said, a lot of folks who don't use bentonite clay, and if they are defensive, will say that it's cat litter. But in reality, it's not. It's bentonite clay. Cat litter is something processed. And sure, it could have a little clay in it, maybe even bentonite, but there are other things in cat litter.
Yeah.
But they'll say, it's cat litter, to get you to go, ew,
Ew.
I don't want to drink anything with cat litter. But it's not cat litter.
Exactly.
And it certainly isn't cat litter that has been used by a cat.
Some people will swallow a little bentonite clay for therapeutic reasons. I don't recommend that, but I know people that do.
Right. It's important to talk about these things because one of the first questions I'm asked after where do you get your protein when I tell people that I'm vegan is, oh, now you don't drink? And the answer to that is a lot of alcoholic beverages are vegan.
Amen.
So you need to be aware.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about COVID-19, which is still with us, and vitamin supplementation.
Vitamins, yes.
Yeah. We talked about this a year ago, and there have been people that have been writing to us from time to time for information on supplementation. I always follow what my colleagues Dr. Joel Furman recommends and what the dietitian Brenda Davis recommends. But there's a new study that just came out, which I find interesting. It's entitled The Effect of High-Dose Zinc and Ascorbic Acid Supplementation versus Usual Care on Symptom Length and Reduction Among Ambulatory Patients with SARS-CoV-2 Infection, the COVID-A to Z Randomized Clinical Trial. This was in JAMA. And the key points that came out of it is that there really were not significant differences with high-dose zinc and vitamin C supplementation on patients with COVID-19.
Right.
And this is interesting, but the key here is high dose. It's important for us to get sufficient amounts of zinc, not too much and not too little. We use Dr. Furman's multivitamins. They have about 7 to 10 milligrams of zinc. And in this study, they gave 50 milligrams of zinc gluconate, and they also offered 8,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C. And we've been taking about 1,000 milligrams per day, kind of when this COVID thing started. Dr. Furman doesn't recommend high doses of anything. He does recommend taking zinc and B12 and DHA and vitamin K, and those are all in his multivitamin. But high dosing is not necessarily beneficial, and there have been people sharing articles and videos about the importance or the efficacy of high dosing of vitamin C. This study says that there really isn't a difference. There was a slight reduction in how long the symptoms lasted. I'm going to read the results from the JAMA Network article. A total of 214 patients were randomized with a mean age of 45.2 years. 132 patients were women. The study was stopped for a low conditional power for benefit with no significant difference among the 4 groups for the primary endpoint. Patients who received usual care without supplementation achieved a 50% reduction in symptoms at a mean of 6.7 days, compared with 5.5 days for the ascorbic acid group, 5.9 days for the zinc gluconate group, and 5.5 days for the group receiving both. There was no significant difference in secondary outcomes among the treatment groups, and the conclusion and relevance, they report, saying that in this randomized clinical trial of ambulatory patients diagnosed with SARS-CoV-2, which is COVID-19, and SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, Coronavirus 2, infection, treatment with high-dose zinc gluconate, ascorbic acid, or a combination of the 2 supplements did not significantly decrease the duration of symptoms compared with standard of care. Interesting article. I think the bottom line is something that Dr. Furman has always recommended, which is keeping your immune system healthy and strong year-round with the food that you eat by eating the nutrient-dense food and avoiding the foods that are going to cause damage. And this is what makes your immune system strong. Yes, we do need to have a certain amount of supplementation in our diets with B12 and vitamin D and a little bit of zinc. High dosing may not offer benefits.
Right. You've also been doing a lot of research lately about vitamin C and the conspiracy theories that are out there about it. Why don't you tell us a few things about that?
Yeah, well, there have been people promoting that high dosing of vitamin C can cure cancer and can cure COVID-19. And they talk about studies that have been done and studies that have been covered up. I haven't seen any evidence.
You haven't seen any science backing this?
No, and Dr. Michael Greger has some great articles where he compares the science that's available on vitamin C testing, and the bottom line is that high dosing has not shown to be helpful. Now, for most cases, high doses of vitamin C are not harmful, and you could get stomach cramps or diarrhea, but it's not really going to harm you. But it has not been proven to help. Now, I have to say that when I was going through my cancer treatment, I spent about $1,000 a month on supplements. And yeah, maybe it was a gamble, but I believed that some of these were helping me in that health crisis when I was also taking in tons of toxins through chemotherapy, which is a very different situation. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how we manage ourselves during this current crisis, and the best way is first with nutrition and nutritional excellence.
And there's another crisis going on that we are forgetting about. There are several. Obviously, you mentioned cancer, which also helps to have nutritional excellence.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
Alzheimer's. You mentioned DHA. And let us know what DHA is and what it does to the brain and why we take a certain kind of DHA and other people take fish oil. Getting back to that fish.
Sure. Well,
fish subject.
Most people have heard about omega-3 fatty acids and omega-6 fatty acids. They are nutrients that are important in the body. We need them both, and they both do lots of things for heart health and brain health, many, many things. The thing is, when you're consuming a highly processed diet, junk food, lots of oils, you're getting too many omega-6 fatty acids. And we need to have this ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids to do what they need to do. And we get too many omega-6 fatty acids and not enough omega-3 fatty acids. So the mainstream world says, well, just eat salmon, take fish oil, and you'll get the omega-3 fatty acids, or you'll get what the body makes from these products, which is DHA and EPA. These are acronyms for longer chemical terms. DHA and EPA is a lot easier to handle. But what we want to do is not eat the processed foods, not eat the junk foods, reduce the amount of omega-6 fatty acids we're getting, and then get a healthy dose of omega-3 fatty acids from flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts, Even leafy green vegetables have a small amount of omega-3 fatty acids, and then you get that ratio in balance. But some of us, and as we get older, our bodies aren't as efficient as making the DHA and the EPA, so supplementation, in some circles, is believed to be a good thing. And Dr. Furman promotes an algae DHA. He offers it. He has a product, DHA Purity. There are other companies that have it, and it's made from algae, and we take it.
And it's where the fish get it.
And it's where the fish get it.
Hello.
Let's go to the source.
Right. It helps to have vitality, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And another thing that we shared last week was a breakfast that I made for you when you were, well, it wasn't last week, was it? It was
a few days ago.
You weren't feeling well. You had the sniffles.
I had a runny nose for less than 24 hours. But when it happened, wow. It's just...
it knocked you out.
I was a faucet.
Right. And so I made you a bowl of oatmeal because that's what you requested. And on top, I poured a bunch of your favorite powders. And they were all in what you just mentioned.
Well, it had chia seeds.
Mm-hmm.
It had...
Bilal's Easy Kale.
Bilal's Easy Kale.
Right.
And blueberries.
Blueberries, which
right.
are great for what?
Blueberries have anthocyanins.
Anthocyanins? What are those, Caryn?
Anthocyanins are those lovely flavonoids, those phytochemicals that have been shown to reduce inflammation, improve cognitive function. They can reduce cardiovascular disease risk, decrease cholesterol levels. They've been shown to prevent cancer in some studies and research, eyesight improvement, improve liver function, and it's a fun word to say. And you get it in all those wonderful purpley colored foods.
Right.
Blueberries, red cabbage,
right.
Things like that.
Beets,
yes.
Can't beat them.
And they're so much fun to say. Anthocyanins.
Anthocyanins. You were resting for a day and then you were fine.
Yeah.
So that's called vitality.
Right.
When your system can cycle that stuff through.
I was also hydrating a lot.
Right.
And I will admit, we have vitamin C powder here. And I was taking more than I normally take.
Again, is it a...
Yes. Is it a placebo or is it really working?
But it made you feel better.
It made me feel better.
Well, last night I got up at 2 in the morning and I took some vitamin C. I don't know why. I just felt like it. I woke up this morning and I felt great. And it wasn't that I was feeling bad. It's just I didn't take it during the day. So it was a pattern. It was a pattern that I've got myself into every day by taking vitamin C. I forgot to take it yesterday and I felt better after I took it. So again, psychologically, was it? Or did I actually really feel better? Who knows?
Who knows?
But if the placebo works, don't fix it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Mardi Gras, Gare. We got some work to do for the rest of the evening if we're going to party.
We're going to make some Etouffe.
And anybody who celebrates Lent, can you say that? Celebrating Lent, or at least
let's
observes?
talk about...
Anyone who observes Lent.
Let's talk about Lent.
My recommendation is go vegan.
Go vegan.
If you're already vegan, go more whole foods.
Well, listen. The summary of the current practice on Ash Wednesday, which is tomorrow, Good Friday, and all the Fridays of Lent, everyone of age 14 and up must abstain from consuming meat. On Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, everyone of age 18 to 59 must fast unless due to unusually or usually a medical reason. So if they're telling you to give up meat on Fridays during Lent, why not just give up meat every day during Lent? I mean...
It makes sense,
It
right?
makes sense. And then at the end of 40 days and 40 nights, you don't need meat. I agree with you. I think we should definitely encourage folks who do practice this Ash Wednesday phenomenon to definitely give up meat for the rest of the 40 days and 40 nights. And we can help you. If you need us, contact us at responsibleeatingandliving.org with your questions.
And if you Haven't signed up yet for the Veguary, which is the entire month of February, and maybe you're thinking of going vegan for Lent. Sign up for Veguary. It's free at the AfroVeganSociety.org. They have things happening every day. You get an email, you get videos, and they're doing a great job.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. And who do you have on the program next week, Caryn? Here at PRN. Yay, PRN!
I'll be talking to Josh Bulk from the Humane Society, and he's the co-founder, along with Josh Tetrick, of the company that is now called Eat Just.
Eat Just.
Yes.
Oh, that's going to be a fabulous
Yeah,
interview.
I think so. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to be talking about the program that Josh Bulk is vice president of at the Humane Society.
Great. That'll be fun.
It should be... I'm going to ask some good questions.
Great. Well, I got to get ready for Mardi Gras.
Okay, Gary, it's been great talking to you.
Been great talking to you, Caryn. Don't forget, baked beignets. That's on the menu today. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Happy Mardi Gras, everyone.
Happy
and
Fat Tuesday.
it's going to be a little bit different this year because a lot of us are going to be indoors.
Yeah.
Not out in the streets partying, spreading COVID. So.
But we can do this.
We can do
this. We're going to get through this together.
Together.
Everybody.
Wherever. Have a delicious week.